In the heart of Arlington, a mid-sized southern city struggling with its deep-rooted legacy of racial bias in law enforcement, Naomi Blake stands as a symbol of both disruption and hope. At 45 years old, Naomi has just been appointed as the first black woman to lead the Arlington Police Department, a department long defined by its traditional, predominantly white leadership and a culture resistant to change. Standing at 5 feet 7 inches tall, Naomi carries herself with unwavering confidence. She wears her short, natural curls like a crown, and her sharp brown eyes miss nothing. Years of navigating a system designed to hold her back have taught her how to read a room, how to speak without raising her voice, and, most importantly, how to command respect without demanding it. She's not interested in shouting to be heard. She lets her integrity speak louder than any raised tone ever could. Naomi's career spans over 2 decades, beginning as a patrol officer in one of the state's most challenging neighborhoods. She's walked beat after beat, responding to domestic calls, gang violence, and missing persons with the same level of professionalism she brings into boardrooms today. Her discipline is ironclad, her decisions calculated. Naomi has never been one to cut corners, and while that hasn't always made her popular, it has made her impossible to ignore. She rose through the ranks slowly, too slowly, many would say, given her record of performance. Promotions that came swiftly to less experienced white male officers were long withheld from Naomi. But she endured, not out of naivety, but because she understood the battlefield. In her own words, "You can't change the system if you're not inside it." Naomi has seen the worst, not just on the streets but within her own department. She's witnessed good officers of color passed over for advancement and heard racist jokes whispered in break rooms like they were just harmless banter. She's seen body cam footage that never made it to the light of day and heard community complaints fall into administrative voids. These experiences didn't harden her, they steeled her. They became her reason for staying. What sets Naomi apart isn't just her resume or her resilience, it's her belief in accountability, not vengeance. Her presence is a threat to the status quo, not because she seeks revenge, but because she represents justice with a spine. She doesn't aim to burn bridges, she plans to rebuild them with reinforced steel. To the outsiders, she's a trailblazer. To the insiders clinging to old systems of power, she's a disruption. But to the people of Arlington, especially the young black girls who now walk past her portrait in City Hall, Naomi Blake is something else entirely. Proof that dignity can wear a badge, that strength can be quiet, and that justice sometimes walks in wearing jeans and a blazer, ready to change the rules from the inside out. It was early morning when Naomi Blake stepped through the front doors of the Arlington Police Department. Not in full uniform, but dressed in dark jeans, a slate gray blouse, and a fitted navy blazer. No badge, no name tag, no entourage. She wanted to see the department not through the lens of authority but through the eyes of an ordinary black woman walking into a space historically unwelcoming to people like her. The moment she entered, Naomi felt the atmosphere. The front desk officers barely glanced up from their coffee and conversation. A middle-aged black man sat quietly in the corner, fidgeting with his hands, clearly waiting for someone to acknowledge him. No one had. For over 15 minutes he had been invisible. Naomi waited a beat, then walked slowly to the reception desk. A young white officer in his early 20s sat behind the counter, eyes glued to his phone. She cleared her throat gently. He looked up with disinterest, his gaze scanning her from head to toe. "What do you need?" he asked flatly, with the tone of someone being inconvenienced. Naomi didn't flinch. "I'm here to see human resources," she replied evenly. The officer gave her a once-over, then shrugged. Without responding, he turned back to his screen. No directions, no help, no acknowledgement. She committed his face to memory. Moments later, the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. A commanding voice behind her said, "What's going on here?" Naomi turned around to see a tall, broad-shouldered officer in a neatly pressed uniform. His badge read, Lieutenant Greg Whitman. Whitman had the look of a man used to being obeyed. Square jaw, buzzed light brown hair, piercing blue eyes. His arms crossed over his chest, and the tone in his voice was not one of curiosity, it was irritation. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. Naomi maintained her poise. I need to complete onboarding paperwork with HR. Whitman scoffed. Paperwork? Are you sure you're in the right place? His eyes narrowed. This isn't the welfare office. Naomi could feel the eyes of the other officers turning toward them. Some were snickering, others just looked away. I believe I am, she said calmly. Whitman leaned in slightly, his smirk widening. We don't have time for people looking to make a fuss or file nonsense complaints. Whatever your issue is, I suggest you take it elsewhere. I'm not here to file a complaint, Naomi replied, keeping her tone cool but firm. I'm here on official business. Oh, Whitman said with mocking curiosity. Let me guess, one of those police accountability activists? Come to check if we're doing our jobs? More laughter. Naomi stood her ground. I need to speak to the HR captain, she repeated. Whitman stepped closer. Lady, if you don't back down and leave now, things might get uncomfortable. Naomi stared at him, her voice steady. Are you threatening me, Lieutenant? It was a powder keg moment, and neither of them knew just how explosive the truth would soon become. Naomi Blake had been in difficult situations before. Domestic disputes that could erupt in seconds, high-stakes standoffs with armed suspects, internal politics laced with hidden threats. But this was personal. Standing just feet away from Lieutenant Greg Whitman in the lobby of the Arlington Police Department, Naomi faced not a criminal, but a product of the very system she had been called to reform. Whitman was seething. The authoritative facade he wore like body armor cracked slightly under the pressure of Naomi's calm defiance. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a black woman who didn't flinch, didn't cower, and didn't retreat. I told you to get out of here, he growled, taking a step forward. The tension in the room thickened. The officers nearby, once chuckling and trading remarks, had gone quiet. Eyes shifted. Some looked away. Others watched with quiet anticipation, unsure how far Whitman would go. Naomi stood firm. I will not leave until I speak with the HR captain. You don't give orders in here, Whitman snapped, now close enough to tower over her. His fists were clenched, his posture rigid. This isn't some community center. You're not entitled to anything just because you walked in here demanding it. Naomi didn't blink. I asked for assistance. That's not a demand, it's a right. Whitman let out a short, sharp laugh. You people always want something. Always think the world owes you. That was the moment the line was crossed. Naomi felt her jaw tighten. You people? He didn't answer, but his eyes said it all. Then, in a move no one in the room expected but that some likely fantasized about, Whitman reached forward, grabbed Naomi's arm, and began to shove her toward the exit. The force caught her off guard, but her instincts kicked in. She pulled back hard, breaking free of his grip, standing tall and steady in the center of the room. Do not put your hands on me again, she said, her voice low and commanding. Whitman was livid. His pride, bruised by her resistance and witnessed by his peers, boiled over. With no further warning he swung. His right fist struck her cheekbone with a force that sent her stumbling backward, hitting the edge of a table before collapsing to the floor. Gasps echoed. A few officers froze mid-step. A couple turned away. No one moved to help. Naomi lay still for only a second. Blood rose in her cheek, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed herself up, brushing off her blazer and standing tall. Dignity intact. Across the room, a door creaked open. The HR director, wide-eyed and holding a folder, took in the scene. In one breathless moment, he shouted, "She's the new chief!" The room froze. The smirk on Whitman's face collapsed. Color drained from his skin, and as Naomi straightened her spine, eyes sharp and unshaken, she uttered 5 words that would change everything. Arrest Lieutenant Greg Whitman, now. The silence after the punch was almost surreal. Naomi Blake stood upright, her cheek bruised and throbbing, but her posture unbroken. Around her, the Arlington Police Department lobby had turned into a museum of stunned faces. Frozen, wide-eyed and pale, then the door to human resources creaked open. A middle-aged man in a light blue dress shirt and khaki slacks stepped into the room, holding a thick personnel file. His eyes scanned the space, registering the tension and the sight of Naomi, injured but upright at the center of it. The folder slipped from his hands. "Oh my God," he breathed, his voice cracking. That's the new chief. That's Naomi Blake." The words cut through the room like a bolt of lightning. Gasps, stiff backs, shuffled feet. The officers who had laughed moments earlier looked at each other in disbelief. Someone whispered, "Did he just say chief?" Another officer instinctively removed his hat. A female admin assistant covered her mouth with both hands. Shock rippled through every corner of the station. Lieutenant Greg Whitman, the man who had just punched Naomi in front of his colleagues, blinked repeatedly. His swagger evaporated. He turned toward Naomi, face pale, eyes desperate. No, that can't be right," he stammered. You're the new chief?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She didn't have to. Her presence said it all. The bruised cheek, the calm expression, the spine straight as an arrow. This wasn't just a woman standing her ground, this was a leader, reclaiming it. Whitman tried again, softer this time. "If I'd known, I wouldn't have—" "You didn't know," Naomi interrupted, her voice cold but composed. "And that's the problem." There was no rage in her tone, no shouting, no vengeance, just clarity. She took one slow step forward, her eyes locked on Whitman. "You didn't just assault a black woman," she continued. "You assaulted your commanding officer, in your own department, in front of everyone here." The HR director stepped forward, confirming her identity for everyone to hear. Naomi Blake, appointed chief of police, effective today. No more doubts, no more guessing. The truth hung in the air like judgment. Naomi turned to the stunned room. "Lieutenant Greg Whitman," she said, her voice now firm, measured, and echoing with quiet authority. "You are under arrest for assaulting a civilian and a superior officer. Officers, take him into custody." Two younger officers hesitated, just for a moment, then stepped forward. They grabbed Whitman by the arms, twisted them behind his back, and slapped on the cuffs. The cold clink of the metal rang out across the lobby like a bell tolling the end of an era. Whitman resisted. "Wait! This is a setup! A mistake! I didn't know." Naomi stood tall. "And now you do." The room remained frozen as Whitman was led away, his former allies silent, eyes lowered, shame painted across their faces. The woman they had ridiculed was now the highest authority in the room. Justice hadn't just walked in that morning, it had finally taken its rightful seat. The day Lieutenant Greg Whitman was led out of the Arlington Police Department in handcuffs marked more than just the downfall of a single officer. It marked the beginning of a reckoning. Within an hour, the footage of the incident had spread like wildfire. Surveillance cameras had caught everything: the punch, the silence, the reveal, and the arrest. By evening, the video had gone viral across social media platforms. Hashtags like Justice in Arlington, Chief Blake, and Reform Now were trending nationwide. News outlets, from CNN to local affiliates, looped the footage while civil rights leaders issued public statements demanding accountability, not just for the assault, but for the entire culture that had allowed it to happen. Inside City Hall, a special emergency session was called that same night. Senior city officials, the police commission, and the mayor gathered around a long oak conference table. At the center lay a growing stack of documents: internal complaints against Whitman, ignored reports of racial bias, and disciplinary actions that had been quietly buried for years. One senior official, flipping through a folder, looked up and said bluntly, "This wasn't a one-time outburst. Lieutenant Whitman has a pattern. It was just never addressed because no one wanted to ruffle feathers." Another nodded solemnly. "And now we've got feathers in the wind." There was no room for debate. Whitman was terminated from the force, effective immediately. Several officers who had participated in or enabled his behavior were suspended pending investigation. A third-party review panel was announced within 48 hours to evaluate the department's leadership structure, diversity training policies, and disciplinary procedures. For the first time in decades, Arlington was confronting the toxic core of its police culture, but while others scrambled to control the damage, Naomi Blake was already focused on transformation. She declined multiple media interviews in the immediate aftermath, choosing instead to speak directly to her department. That Friday morning, she stood before the entire Arlington police force in full uniform, the gold badge on her chest gleaming under the overhead lights. "I didn't come here to protect a broken system," she said, her voice steady. I came here to rebuild it, and that starts today." She laid out a bold agenda: mandatory anti-bias training for every officer, a new public complaint tracking system, and the formation of a civilian oversight board with real authority, not just ceremonial power. Promotions would be reviewed with transparency and equity audits. Internal affairs would be restructured under direct supervision of her office. Some officers applauded, others remained stiff, silent, but all knew things would never be the same. 2 days later, Naomi addressed the public in front of City Hall. With rows of reporters, cameras, and citizens watching, she said, "What happened to me was not unique. It was just finally visible. This department will no longer hide behind silence. If you wear this badge, you will answer to it." The crowd erupted in applause. The message was clear: Arlington would no longer tolerate quiet corruption. And Naomi Blake wasn't just here to lead, she was here to change everything. Naomi Blake didn't need to raise her voice to shake the foundation of a broken system. Her presence, her poise, and her refusal to back down spoke louder than any protest sign or viral headline. In a world where too many stories of injustice end in silence or excuses, hers became a rare example of quiet resistance transforming into real reform. What started as an ordinary day at a police station became a defining moment for an entire city, and perhaps for the country. Naomi didn't walk in to make a scene. She walked in to observe, to understand the culture she had been chosen to lead. But what she found was worse than disrespect. It was deeply rooted arrogance, casual racism, and the normalization of violence against those perceived as less than. And yet, even after being assaulted, publicly humiliated, and mocked in front of a room full of her subordinates, she didn't return the hate. She didn't retaliate. She stood up, dusted herself off, and changed the game, not with vengeance, but with vision. Naomi Blake's story reminds us that true strength doesn't always come with noise or fury. It often shows up in quiet resolve, steady courage, and unwavering dignity. As we age, we come to understand that reacting with anger rarely changes hearts, but standing firm in truth can move mountains. Naomi didn't fight fire with fire. She met prejudice with poise, disrespect with discipline, and injustice with integrity.